I write this a couple of days after they uploaded the video of paranormal phenomena. When listening to our stories, I think that they had previously uploaded a video of someone who told a similar experience. But I no longer remember it very well. I found their channels in maybe a month, or a month and a half, but my cousin and I have already seen all of your videos. I really enjoy your stories. I never listen to them at night or alone because, to be honest, I'm a little afraid, but I enjoy how you have no idea listening to them. The afternoon I saw that video, I couldn't help but feel very identified. When I started listening to them, I was on vacation and my sisters who work in another city slept with me. But since last week when I went to class and she slept alone, I have been living in a nightmare. I am not very religious. I do believe in God, but for a while now I'm not much of a churchgoer. It all started on the night of smells. As that day I had returned to class after leaving school, I got home and slept all afternoon. That's why I couldn't sleep in the middle of the night. Around 1 in the morning I began to see shadows, lights, hear noises and knocks outside my room, in the patio, which is completely surrounded by walls. At first I thought that someone had entered, and I was moving the chairs in the garden dining room that we have outside. Large chairs and very heavy metal material, impossible for a cat or any other animal to move. That's why I got alarmed and took my cell phone to call. Just before calling, I saw several lights move together through the patio, and then I realized that it wasn't someone who was outside making all that fuss. Tonight I slept with my parents. The next day after returning from school, I put holy water in the patio and my mom gave me a rosary, which I used daily several years ago. In addition to putting religious statuettes in my room that night, I slept well, but the next 2 nights everything happened again, only with a small difference. This time the shadows were inside my room. I went back to sleep with my parents. I'm almost 17. I have no reason to want to sleep with my parents, having a room to myself with all the privacy I need. But I still feel like this presence or whatever is going to try to get me out of my room. The weekend everything went normally. My brothers were here, so I wasn't alone. Also, a couple of nights ago my best friend came to my house. We ordered pizza for dinner and we watched a movie, taking advantage of the fact that we wouldn't have classes next. They gave us around 12, and when he was leaving and I was entering the house, I tried to open the door and the key broke. One part remained inside the lock and the other stuck to the key ring with the rest of the keys. And it was something extremely strange since I didn't apply any force when trying to open the door. I had to call my mom to open it, and luckily my friend hadn't left yet when all this happened, but I really feel like it's like if they had tried to judge me as a trap to leave me alone in the yard at that time. It is worth mentioning that when I turned 15, they built a room on the 2nd floor where I don't even sleep alone. But it is where my friends and I go when we met, like on that occasion. When my mother opened the door for me and my friend went into my room, I put on pajamas and lay down, but without turning off the light, while I was looking at anything on my cell phone. I have always had the habit of sleeping with the bathroom light on, or the television on. That time the phone signal went out. The internet also suddenly stopped working, so I had to restart it. While I was doing this, the television turned off by itself. As soon as I recovered the phone signal, I called my mother to come over the room for me, since to get to his room I have to go through the kitchen and the back patio, something that I don't feel very comfortable doing alone, much less in a situation like this. It's not like I can relate his videos to what's happening to me. But my experiences coincide a lot with what the girl in the previous video told you. Since I started watching them, this has happened to me. I thought that the first person who wrote to them or something similar was a mere coincidence, but since I saw a second person said almost the same thing, I was encouraged to write this to you. I also have to tell you that the few nights I found your channel, I had to sleep alone. I don't remember why, but what I do remember is that something somewhat invisible, so to speak, told me. He pulled me by the arms and sat on the bed as if he wanted to carry me, but I just let myself fall. Again, with all my strength, of course. I cannot guarantee that it really happened or that it was just a dream. But what I can tell you is sure is that he had scratches on his forearm. Waking up with scratches that I didn't have and that I couldn't have given myself because my dreams are short. It may not be as bad as what happened to the other 2 people, but I think that's partly because I have not been exposed to sleeping alone when all this manifests itself. The truth is that I find myself very confused and quite scared by this situation because I have never experienced something so constant of this nature. I have no explanation why everything happens. When I was approximately 5 years, I used to go every weekend to visit an aunt's house, who at that time lived in the community with a high citizen population. Every time I went in my parents' car with my 2 younger brothers, and I always preferred go next to the window because it made me dizzy, so I always looked outside the whole way. To get to my aunt's house, my dad always took the same route. We passed through the same streets, but there was one that was the busiest that caused me a lot of fear, and as the views passed that were not the same. The moment I realized that I always saw one person in particular. It was a person of an unusual height, even smaller than me, being that I have never been a tall person, and it is worth noting that at my young age I knew that there were small people, dwarf people as they are commonly called. But now that I remember it, I seemed to be the height of a baby, and that was what attracted me the most. Attention. At first he wore a little pointy hat and had such a long beard. It is impossible for me to remember exactly how he was dressed, but the only thing I can't forget is his look. Every time we passed by that street, he was there walking between all the people in the opposite direction to the one I was going. And at first it was strange to me that no one seemed to notice that he was there, because people passed by as if nothing had happened without turning to see him or being alarmed by his peculiar appearance. For these reasons I began to feel curious, and every time we passed by that street I tried to look for him. He was always walking towards the same direction with the same appearance. I began to have doubts, and I wondered why I always ran into him in the same place no matter what time it was. Little by little these doubts turned into restlessness, until the day he realized that I was also there, and that was when the fear really began. Now he looked at me every time. Every time we passed, his gaze followed me as I drove away in the car. A strong look, but not angry or uncomfortable, but very cold and deep, and it made me more and more afraid, until I reached a point of hiding when we passed along the same path. But despite the fear, my curiosity was greater, and I always ended up sweating, and in fact he was always there, as if he were waiting for me too, and to the point where I could no longer stand all those sensations. And when I passed by there, I asked my younger sister, who was 3 years old at the time, if she saw it too, and she answered yes. At that moment I felt a little calm, knowing that I was not the only one who seems to see it, although the fear did not go away. A couple of times after asking my sister, I decided to ask my parents. The reason for letting so much time pass was because they taught us that we should not criticize or judge others based on their appearance. I was afraid that they would scold me until one day when I finally saw him again. I asked if they could see him, but they didn't answer. Although I kept insisting that he was there, he kept looking at me. My desperation and fear were greater when I heard my parents tell me over and over again that they didn't see anything. What I was describing to you. Shortly after we stopped going because the aunt we were visiting died. That reason and my constant questioning to my parents about that being meant that we will no longer return to that place to visit the relatives who still lived there. I don't know what really made me forget that experience. But it wasn't until I was 12 that while watching scary videos with some friends, they showed me one that I now know is fake, in which supposed goblins appeared, and that's when I remembered that story for a while. The similarities of the elf in the video, and the being that I saw when I was a child. Now that I am 22 years old, and after I remembered that story again, I occasionally pass by that place again, but never seen it again. Now we live in an apartment building in the neighborhood near the City Avenue. A very quiet place, even though in other areas of the neighborhood there is usually a lot of crime. We live on the top floor, and in summer we even leave the apartment door open only with the outside grill, which we don't even lock. In short, it is a very nice place to live. However, everything changed. We began to notice the activities of some neighbors in the downstairs, the building. From our washing area, we can see the washing area of the apartments in the other sector center of the building, and we began to notice very strange things in the opposite apartment on the floor below. I don't know if they were people who were they moved or we had simply never paid attention to them. But on one occasion in the early morning, I don't remember why I was awake, but a burned place that caught my attention when I went out to the laundry area. The neighbors of this apartment were apparently burning something, and the smell, it was like burning hair. But soon I could see that they were actually feathers that were burning, feathers of an animal that seemed to be alive. I was really scared, but I decided to go to sleep, and the next day I talked to my friends to investigate where we could report that these people did that with their animals. And I mentioned it to my mother, and when she talked about it with other neighbors, they told her that the best thing would be to be at peace with these particular people, and that we not get involved. Problems because of that warning, we never said anything about it again. And in that apartment, there is a lady in particular who really scares me. Even when I find myself on the stairs, she doesn't wear light clothes. She doesn't have a horrible appearance, but there are some in her eyes, and his smile that gives me chills. Last weekend, as it was hot, we had the door open while we were playing video games, and again a sound that caught our attention. When we looked out, we went towards that apartment, and there was the woman who seemed to be tearing off wings, and he was killing very small white pigeons, tearing off their heads. But he does it with such normality as someone who has flowers and they are cutting off their stems. Before I could say anything to my friend, I felt like they poured a bucket of cold water on me. The woman turned around, and he stared without saying anything at where we were. I told my friend that we did not mess with those people while I tried to explain to him. Many slow steps down the hallway heading to my door. I remembered that we had it open, and I ran to close it once closed. The lady knocked once, just once, and then she stood there for several minutes alone in front of the door. I don't know why we couldn't see her feet underneath it. And she didn't say anything, and she didn't tell my mom either, but since that happened, I swear that in my house now you can hear a lot of footsteps and voices in the early morning. Sometimes even from my room I hear them moving dishes in the kitchen, or dragging things when there is no one awake at those hours, or it could be its management, of course. But since then I feel that there is something with us at home. I will tell you more on another occasion. Thank you for reading.